Hi, welcome to Rendered. Today's guest is Kunal Thandani. He's a product and growth leader at House. House is a platform focused on home building, remodeling, and design. So much of the conversations today happening with AI are centered around digital work. So that's writing, coding, workflows, and productivity. But another area that's making fast progress is AI in the physical economy. At a company like House, it all gets a view into how homeowners, contractors, designers, and service providers actually are working with this new technology. So Kunal, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and excited to kind of talk about how the physical world is getting rewired, what's already working,
Yeah.
where there's an area of opportunity, and then also wrapping up with, how is AI kind of leveraging a lot of us and a lot of the companies that are being created today.
Perfect. That sounds great. And so I think to start off, when we first had our initial conversation, we talked about the physical economy, and that was actually a term I hadn't heard before. So would love for you to describe it. What is the physical economy?
Yeah, I guess when I kind of think about the physical economy, it's a lot of these like heavy service-based businesses. So you can kind of think about, AI is more of a enabler for kind of the core action, right? So say for a concierge medicine practice, AI would be empowering or enabling the doctors.
Okay.
Or for example, at a roofing company, it would basically be AI would empower kind of the field technicians, right? So kind of the physical, economy is how is it actually impacting you and your interactions in the real world?
Okay, gotcha. Because I think a lot of times people hear physical economy with AI, they automatically, their mind goes to like robots. Um, and so it doesn't seem like that's always the case, right? It's like, how can we use AI to actually change workflows of physical tasks that are happening in our world?
Exactly, yeah. It could be through robots or it could be software enabled actions kind of empowering in-person kind of interactions.
Okay, nice. And so like maybe it could be helpful. Could you walk us through like a typical home service workflow from lead all the way to a project being completed? And then maybe you could talk about where you're starting to see AI start to pop up in this workflow.
Yeah, yeah. So let's kind of take a general contractor's workflow, right?
Yeah.
So it basically starts with the lead. The lead comes in. Then from there you manage a lead. You would, either create, kind of a floor plan or a 3D kind of model what their dream kitchen could look like.
Okay.
So it's more of a pre-sales tactic. Then from there, after that is approved, you could go ahead and create an estimate for your, prospective client. Then from there, if everything looks good, you would create an invoice, and then you would create a kind of project management Gantt chart of what this could look like,
Mhm.
how long it would take, what are the different milestones, and then at the end of each milestone, you're basically getting paid, and then you're kind of managing a lot of the bookkeeping, right? So I think where it is today is every step of this is AI empowered,
Okay.
but there hasn't been too much redesign of like these steps still exist,
Okay.
but the overall workflow hasn't been redesigned, but it's been more AI enabled. So you can think about, for example, like lead management.
Mhm.
You could use AI to find you homeowners in your area that just bought an older home
Okay.
and reach out to them proactively before they actually start a renovation project. To potentially also, you get a missed call on your phone.
Mhm.
AI can nurture these calls and help book meetings when you're in the field working. So I'd say the lead management aspect is very AI powered, and it really
Yeah.
helps the pro focus on their trade in person. And then you have like the estimate, invoice, 3D modeling,
Yep.
which a lot of this is, estimates and invoices used to be something that used to take hours at end, but now it's prompt to creation. So you could talk through it for this kitchen remodel in this zip code, with this budget, how would I kind of construct the estimate?
Yeah.
And then for 3D modeling, I think the interesting thing is I think a lot of people are already going to a lot of these, LLMs to, create 2D kind of images of, for example, for you, if you wanted to create a podcast room and
Yeah.
look at what that could look like, you could create a 2D image.
Yep.
But over here, it's helping you actually, 3D modeling in this case could, help you actually understand the spatial requirements. Would it actually fit? Would it not? It's
Yeah.
actually helping you not only it's taking basically from inspiration
Yeah.
to creating this 2D image to then converting it to a 3D image so you can actually go from, hey, this will fit, have way more confidence, and then go ahead and buy what's needed or actually get the full kind of picture, right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I've seen some of those technologies already a little bit. But when we start to think about disruption, is this the right way to be thinking about it? Where it's like, let's look at what exists today, the workflows that exist today. Let's use AI to kind of mimic that, simplify it. Or should we be thinking about it in a little bit of a different way? Like, is there opportunity here to completely revamp and redo the workflow that happens today?
Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
the core framework that exists today is there's some sort of trigger, right?
Yeah.
AI acts,
Yep.
and then the human basically closes, right? So like an
Yeah.
example of this is for like a roofing company, a storm hits Miami,
Yeah.
then voice AI will basically call these homeowners and try to book appointments right at the point the storm happens.
Yeah.
And the human will take the appointment and try to close them, right? So
Yeah.
this is the case for like across the board, across like dentists, across, roofing, across leasing companies, right?
Yeah.
And how I would actually think about it is, at least today, I think it's more, I think it comes down to leverage. I think there's still a huge like human and in-person kind of trust element that's really needed to
True.
unclosed projects. But then
Yeah.
also when you're dealing with a lot of larger like check sizes,
Yeah.
for example, these renovation projects are a few $100,000, or
Mhm.
even like replacing a roof is a pretty high investment.
Yeah.
I think that's where AI falls short. And I think it's much
Okay.
harder to redesign kind of that closed step of the process. But I think within kind of the trigger and act uh, section, I think that's where you can kind of not only redesign the workflow, but also like redesign who you actually hire and that you actually.
Yeah. And your examples actually have me thinking about something. A lot of, like you mentioned, the dentist, the roofing example where there's some damage done. A lot of these are very like reactive responses. Something happens in the physical world and now someone needs to go in and fix it or change it. With AI getting better at being able to actually predict these events, right? There's almost like a misalignment between the incentives of people in the physical economy who almost in a way, like if a roof gets damaged, right? You now have to fix it, right? So now there's like something that you have to do. But if we were able to use AI to predict, hey, like we expect that there's going to be a storm in the next X months, we suggest you do this, like reinforce your roof in a different kind of way. How do we think about that a little bit? Kind of like the misalignment between AI maybe reducing the need for as much physical needs.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So it's kind of like less reactive to more proactive or identifying those signals earlier on,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, I think what I've kind of seen over there, which I think is pretty interesting, is, historically, rental buildings, what they
Uh-huh.
used to do is, you would go on their website, you would chat or call them, book an appointment, and then go to the tour and then decide, hey, do I actually want to rent or not? Right. So,
Yeah.
and even though like when we think about the reactive part here, there's been some progression around, you can automatically talk to, say, X rental building in New York, their
Mhm.
AI assistant, book a tour. And, a lot of these in-person tours end up, it could be actually very like AI driven.
Okay.
Um, actually just get the key, check into the office, get the key. But
Yeah.
what I'm seeing now is like the proactive part of it is, hey, instead of just waiting for people to come and hear about your building,
Yeah.
how do you actually go out and identify tenants that are at a similar kind of income level,
Okay.
maybe in similar zip code,
Yeah.
that their lease is actually coming up, right? And I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
AI actually has access to a lot of this like public data on like lease terms where
Yeah.
you could actually create an outbound or cold outreach approach
Yeah.
to help fill your building really quickly. And I've been
Yeah.
seeing that this trend come up a lot within like real estate, private equity firms
Yeah.
that are thinking about ways on like,
Huh.
decreasing time of like vacancy for these buildings.
Interesting. Okay. And then I think another area that's kind of related as well is like I've done the whole looking for an apartment in New York an awful process. But you do the whole FaceTime view, you see photos online, but then you actually go to the spot and it looks completely different. And you can see, oh my God, it's actually a lot smaller than the image looks like and stuff like that. So do you think there will ever be a point where like AI, VR, AR gets so good where people would be able to like buy a home, buy an apartment building or sign without actually ever going into it and seeing it themselves?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's like how much can AI bridge the trust gap, right?
Okay.
I think something about, I think, we as humans, right? We value our home environment a lot.
Yeah.
And I think you're spending, especially if you're, a remote worker
Yeah.
or spending at least a few days a week working from home.
Yeah.
I think the trust gap there is much, much larger, right? Because you value your office, your bedroom, the actual neighborhood that you live in.
Yeah.
You have kids you care about, schooling you care about, the
Yeah.
clientele, you care about convenience to everything kind of around your home.
Yeah.
And I think in this day and age where it is today, to
Mhm.
truly just replace that feeling of I'm ready to basically pull the trigger to
Yeah.
buy this home because I don't really understand spatially
Yep.
what it looks like. And then also from like a environment and neighborhood perspective,
Yeah.
what does that like? Do I feel safe? Do
Yeah.
I feel happy?
Yeah.
And I think like that self-exploration, I
Yeah.
think is really hard to place today.
Yeah. No, makes sense. And both in terms of like getting the actual human experience of feeling it, but then also having that trust in the AI that's maybe able to mimic that is also kind of lacking today.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to bring up two companies that are early signals of AI moving into the physical economy. The first one is this company, Rent a Human. I still can't tell if it's a real company or if it's kind of like a joke. I'm not sure. It's kind of scary, but it's a platform where AI agents can hire humans to perform real world tasks. So kind of a scary and interesting signal that flips like the usual framing of humans using AI tools instead to now AI systems coordinating human labor so they can do stuff in the physical world. So want to talk a little bit more about that, your thoughts on that. And then I know you brought up this other company called Zuru Tech. They're a company really trying to rethink how buildings are designed and produced through intelligent design, digital fabrication, and automated construction workflows. So, yeah, what are you seeing in the startup world when it comes to the physical economy?
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, right? So I think Zero Tech is AI kind of reaching into the physical world through robots, right? And then like Rent a Human is AI reaching into the physical world through humans, right? So it's like
Yeah,
both are happening pretty simultaneously. And
yeah,
I think this rewiring is pretty interesting, right? So I think my kind of point of view, right? I think on, Rent a Human, right? Which is, I think it's a super like interesting signal experiment project. I feel like why we're still like years away from making this actually work and productionalize.
yeah.
I think one is trust and accountability, right? So I think who's actually liable when an AI hired human does
Hmm.
something wrong, right? Like I think a lot of those like legal frameworks today don't really exist.
Yeah,
I think second is like quality control at scale
yeah,
is pretty unsolved, right? So I think AI can't really evaluate whether a physical task was actually done well, which I
yeah.
think is like, you still have inspectors that come in throughout home builds and so on to check,
Hmm.
hey, is this actually built right? What's the regulatory and all that stuff? And then I think lastly is also just, last mile complexity, right? I think like physical tasks have infinite variables. Like even look at like and Uber Eats, right? Like even the last mile of delivery,
Yeah,
getting into the building, finding the apartment. I just feel like today the current agents can't actually anticipate this.
yeah,
So I think it's like super fascinating experiment, but I think as a product, I think it's like right now it's a solution
yeah,
that's looking for infrastructure that doesn't really actually exist today, right? It's kind of like building a product when like the infrastructure of humankind is not ready for it, right? You have to like time both of those things for it to actually work.
yeah.
Uh, and
Sure.
then I think Zero Tech is interesting, right? It's kind of like, reaching out into the physical world through robots. It's kind of this like quote, right? It's like this is like the canary in the coal mine for all physical trades, which is basically like back in the day, coal miners, used to bring canaries into mines because then they could predict like, hey, if the birds died from like toxic gas before humans could detect it, it basically
Yeah.
gives miners a very early warning to basically get out. So I think like
Hmm.
what this company I think represents to me is like something bigger is coming because just take for example the LA fires, right? Their first project is actually rebuilding homes where a lot of the homes that got burnt down during the LA fires happened.
Yeah.
And they've actually built and completed one home, right? So it's like robots that are actually like laying the bricks. So it's solving, I think, the huge like labor shortage, right? Less people are
Yeah.
going into trade specialties, right? But I
Yeah.
think it's also solving like speed and cost. So I think today a typical probably new home build is maybe a profit margin is around 10%, but
Okay.
this would like massively change a lot of those margins, through, as they kind of productionalize and scale this up.
No, that's really cool. And I know I've seen a lot of like these ideas of like these 3D printed buildings and like using AI and robots to like build these kind of like cookie cutter, really like, in my opinion, kind of like lacking character,
Yeah, yeah.
anything kind of buildings. So is Zuru Tech kind of like trying to mimic the very human process of building a home with robots? Is that the idea?
I think it's actually taking more of, when you go to, let's take like a like Toll Brothers home, right?
Yeah.
Like a new Toll Brothers kind of community.
Yeah.
It's basically you have a matrix of items to pick from, right? Like you have 10 different floorings to pick from, you have 10 different counters to pick from, 10
Yeah.
different staircases. So I think it's like still building homes within um a finite amount of options and
Okay.
selections, but I don't think it's building homes from, hey, this is my dream home.
Okay.
And how would I build that with a kind of a infinite kind of option or infinite variables at hand, right? So I think it's
Yeah.
within kind of a finite world and finite kind of set of options, but you're still building very luxury homes.
Okay, gotcha. Makes sense. But I think one thing I like to really explore is the creativity of AI. And like designing a home can be like a really creative process, right? Like with working with the architect, you can like build a home that's never even been like thought of before. And you can build something that
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
and like from us talking about how important your home is and you spend most of your time in your home, right? So if it becomes so much cheaper and faster to use AI to build maybe that kind of design where you have 10 options for this, 10 options for this. Like what is that what does that say for the future creativity of homes and living and design?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, yeah, there's no like flair factor, right? Or
Exactly.
there's no like, hey, this like Kunal's personality, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where I kind of think like maybe it's like the opposite, right? Where, you use AI to build the base foundational home,
Yeah.
right? But then you bring in a lot of these specialized trades to come in to really work on like the last mile, right? So if I want a speakeasy in my basement,
Yeah.
right? Or some sort of like secret room that's, part of who I am, that's where maybe I would work with someone that that would specialize in, these type of like renovations, like working with like a design build firm.
Will homes all look like these? Like I see all these like sky-rise buildings popping up by me in Greenpoint. All the homes look the same. Is that sort of the future you think we're heading towards?
Yeah, I mean, I think with take Zero Tech, when we get to the point of like productionalizing and, costs coming down, right?
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a huge influx of new homeowners into the market, right? I think a lot more people can probably afford. We're building a lot more.
Hmm.
So I think what's going to probably end up happening is demand could potentially outpace supply, right?
Okay.
And in this case, in kind of that specific market,
Yeah.
you don't really get the choice or the customizations, right? Because
Yeah.
potentially the builder in this case is going after the buyer that could take it off their hands immediately,
Mhm.
right? I think what's going to happen is a lot more people are going to come. There's going to be a lot more homeowners.
Yeah.
And I think people are going to be happy with what they bought. I
Yeah.
think what's going to end up happening is we'll probably see 5, 10 years after being in that home, a huge spike in probably renovation projects.
Okay.
So I think
Yeah.
it's probably just gonna shift from customization up front to probably customization when you hit your next, say, season in life, right? When you have your second kid,
Yeah.
or when you have your first kid, or you start a business and you're working from home more, right? Or your in-laws move in with you, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's gonna be much easier, and I think part of that will be, you know, does this fit my personality and mold and kinda and flair? And I think it will. I think it will just be, just delayed.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. I hope so. Yeah, because like, I'm always kinda skeptical, like, I do believe there is a path where AI can, put us in this, like, really abundant and efficient world where everyone's living in a nice home, and but then I'm also like, okay, if everyone's living in the same home, where does like the ability to have creativity and I don't know, unique flair come into play, and what are we losing in that process? But I like that take where maybe we still have those options. It just might come at a different time.
Yeah, and I think, like, how I would kinda think about it is maybe from, like, an, income level,
Okay.
right? So I think from, lower to, like, middle class, I think in that case, home environment, exclusivity, things like that don't matter as much.
Yeah.
So I would say in those cases, I would say productionalizing, is probably where it would start, right? But
Yeah.
then I think when you get to, like, more expensive zip codes
Yep.
and kind of upper kind of middle class or upper class,
Yeah.
I would say that is probably a huge kind of area where I don't think there's gonna be a lot of disruption, right? Because, 1, I think it's much more regulated. I think those zip codes have a lot more reach and influence that the others don't, right? So I think maybe accessibility, this is, just kinda my initial point of view, but, like,
Yeah.
does that personalization and customization, will that only exist for, the upper middle class? Maybe that's kind of one way to also kind of think about it.
Yeah. It's sort of like film photography and vinyl, which is expensive now. It's analog and it's expensive. So I feel like that's what you see in higher income kind of households.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense that it could also apply to home design as well. I want to pivot a little bit. So, healthcare and medicine, also, I guess, technically part of the physical economy. What shifts, what changes are you seeing happening in that space? I know you're familiar with that world as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think going back to that, initial kind of framework we talked about, right? I think, like,
Yeah,
similar thing kind of happening, right? I mean, the trigger, the acting, and then the actual, like, say, closing in this case
yeah,
is still, very relevant to kind of the healthcare space, right? I mean, I think we talked about, um, dentists, right? I think,
yeah,
basically, like, replacing the front desk, right? Everything from, managing calls, missed calls, checking insurance, outbound, right? Which could be sending appointment reminders.
yep.
A lot of this stuff is HIPAA compliant and happening. But then I think also something interesting is in the healthcare space is a lot of it's not like B2B SaaS where, like, pricing is on, publicly available to everyone. But
Mhm,
a
mhm.
lot of what's how hospital systems and how pricing and packaging happens is very opaque.
Yeah,
No one really knows. You just get a bill, and
literally.
this is how
Yep.
how much you're basically charged.
Yeah,
And I think there's a disruption here that's happening, which is I've been seeing a lot within, like, the concierge medicine space, which is I'm in X zip code in the Bay Area.
yeah,
Ho Like, for my specialty, what is a doctor down the road charging, right? And I think using, like, voice AI to actually collect pricing information by talking to them, understanding how do you charge, what are add-ons, and then summarizing a recommendation, "Hey, based on all the doctors in your portfolio, this is how I would charge," and then humans actually then finalizing the pricing and kind of publishing not publishing, but rolling out the pricing to, because I think in the concierge medicine space,
Yeah.
it is very, even though it's becoming more and more mainstream, it is still for like upper middle class and
Yeah.
above, where, obviously the experience matters a lot, right? And the convenience matters a lot, but I still think to some degree,
Yeah.
pricing and packaging matter a lot more. And it's a huge part of like why, someone converts or not, right? So I think that's kind of what I've kind of been seeing, in kind of the healthcare space,
Yeah. Are insurance firms and healthcare providers happy with this shift that's starting to happen, do you think? Like
that they're happy.
yeah, like giving more transparency into pricing and all that stuff. A lot of insurance firms and healthcare providers are able to actually benefit from this lack of transparency. So do you think they'd be like supportive of these? And like how does that work out?
You don't have infinite supply, right? And you have like a shortage of, doctors where
Yeah.
you can't just, price cut.
Yeah.
So I think how I think about it is I don't think they're going to be unhappy because it doesn't impact maybe their take home rate, right?
Okay.
The space is just going to get to the point of like smarter and like fair pricing across the board,
Yeah.
which I think is one thing. And I don't think there's unhappiness, because I think a lot of what I'm kind of talking about, it's not where I think there's a lot of hype is AI is going to replace the skilled tradesperson, right? I mean, the person that's like checking your blood pressure or fixing your cavity, right? They're not going anywhere. It's not the tradesperson that's going away. I think what's actually going away is the 3, 5, 10 person like admin team that's calling, scheduling, following up, billing kind of manually. So
Yeah.
what's really kind of happening is like AI is like eating kind of more of like the operations layer and not
Okay.
so much the craft layer.
Okay.
Where I think if it was impacting the craft layer, I think that's where we would see a lot more of like the disgruntled, tradesperson, right?
Yeah. When do you think we'll have a robot filling a cavity?
I think it comes back to the trust gap, right?
Yeah.
And then who's liable, which we kind of talked about, right? And then
Totally.
labor laws that are
Yeah.
ready to actually kind of get there, right? I would say we're probably still like, I would say like 10 to 15 years away from that.
Okay. Yeah, because I could foresee the technology gets there faster than we put laws in place for that. And so
Yeah,
that
yeah, exactly.
factor, right?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Hmm.
I think in
Okay.
this case, the laws that would slow us down, not and regulatory, and less about the technology.
Yeah. No, for sure. And so today, if you're like a business owner, let's say you're a plumber or you own a roof construction site or something like that, what should you be doing today to make sure that like, you're using the tools to like grow and enable your business if you're not already doing it?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say the main thing is like replacing your back office, right?
Okay.
So I would
Gotcha.
say like the easy kind of wins here, right,
Yeah.
are one is just booking more meetings on your calendar.
Okay.
Everything from like setting up the right agents that would book meetings for you, find the right signals, book meetings for you,
Yeah.
making sure you have the right agents across your website, your lead form, all your service on social media, everything. So everything comes in, you have basically a unified communications layer that will get back to anyone with smart answers. That's kind of one clear area, right? The second is, I think, client communications, like more of like the status updates, the project management, the creation of like the documents that go along with, progressing each project through the life cycle.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'd probably say like, I think the last piece, which is like a pretty interesting space, I was, researching found.ai, which is basically like AI bookkeeping for SMBs.
Okay.
So they're basically in bookkeeping, it would basically effectively like replace a QuickBooks integration,
Huh?
or replace everything, and kind of your bank account, and all your kind of funds will run through this platform. But you're saving basically like you would hire a maybe part-time bookkeeper for your SMBs
Mm-hmm.
for, I don't know, maybe 50K a year. That could get to the point, and it is probably already there, where you don't effectively even need a bookkeeper anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. True. For these kind of products, I know you just mentioned a company. Are you team build or buy for these small businesses? Like I know today you could vibe code like half the stuff that exists today, or are you kind of the team like buy something that already exists today, especially depending on how big your company is and how many tech resources you have?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say there's like a one size fits all, but
Okay.
where kind of my thoughts are today is
Yeah.
I think it's always buy
Okay.
initially because the idea hasn't been validated.
Okay.
Like you want to make sure that you set up this missed call agent,
Hmm.
I was gonna say you will basically you want to make sure that you're actually closing more projects, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the priority, not like
Buying is
building.
always like much speed to
Yeah.
market, more expensive, right? Only if you pass certain, thresholds does a unit economics actually make sense for you to actually build it in-house.
Yeah.
I think the question now is like for your first iteration
Hmm.
for buying is like, what is the fidelity you want to buy into, right? Do you want to buy just the technology so you can kind of build the back end infrastructure? Or do you also actually want to buy a full end-to-end solution which actually has all the client side elements where you can kind of monitor
Yeah.
what is in kind of its journey, and I think that's probably like the harder decision to make.
Yeah. Yeah. No, makes perfect sense. And so that kind of leads us nicely to our next topic. Something that you've been seeing is the rise of the one person economy and like the one person business, right? One person startups. So what does this mean? And do you actually believe this shift is starting to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think my kind of honest point of view is
Yeah.
we're not headed to a world of like one person unicorns,
Okay.
but we're really headed to a world where like individuals or like small teams can punch way above their weight, right? So small teams can basically like operate like they're 3, 5, 10x their actual size, right? Like an example of this is, the personal everyone wants to create a personal brand, right? Where they're writing a newsletter, they're running a podcast, they're having a LinkedIn presence, where before you would actually have to have a larger team to manage lead gen, commenting, scraping relevant content, figuring out what to write on, podcast production, content repurposing, like taking one piece of content and automatically creating a newsletter, a LinkedIn post, short clips that you could
Yeah.
take it from there. I think you're seeing the rise of a lot more people that want to create a personal brand because
Yeah.
they don't actually need a team initially to
Hmm.
kind of create that, right? And you can set up a lot of these agents across each of your verticals to run a lot of these things end to end.
Yeah.
I think the shift here is it's less from like, hey, do I have the team to execute? To we've probably heard this a lot, but do you have the taste and judgment to actually direct, right? So I think that's kind of where the shift is happening with the rise of a lot of these like one person, companies.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can see just I like how you said everyone like wants to have a brand, everyone wants to have their own podcast, like a big LinkedIn presence. So as that becomes easier for everyone to do, and it's the differentiation factor like more so put on then how good is like your content, how good is your brand now that everyone has the ability to actually like go ahead and create it.
Yeah, I actually think I don't know if you've been seeing this trend where brands used to go to like the biggest influencer out there to collaborate with, but
Hmm.
now there's this rise of brands that want to work with like micro influencers now, right? And I think it's similar thing with like personal brands where I think it's less about competing in the exact same domain, right? But I think what's going to end up happening is with personal brand presence, it's going to be, a lot of people with these businesses will just have to become more and more niche, right? And it's come down to like, how can you add value for this specific niche for a
Hmm.
smaller group, but you're adding a lot more value and you're, publishing content kind of end to end, right? So I think that's kind of what I would actually see happen, right? I don't think it would
Yeah.
ever like stump like full creativity, right? But
Yeah.
there would just have to be a pivot on like focus on less, but do it really well.
Cool. I love that. If you had to, I mean, if you were doubling down and picking your micro niche community, what would be yours?
Micro niche community.
Yeah, like that you're a big influencer. Kunal's like the person in this micro niche community.
I think one would be interesting thing is when I travel,
Uh-huh.
I think it's less about going to TripAdvisor or it's watching Netflix food documentaries, right? But I think for me, what I try to do is like, what are those like very like unique experiences?
Yeah.
Like, where can I dine at a church after hours and do a multi-course experience, right?
Okay.
Where can I dine at, basically like a chef's home? And I
Yeah.
think it's like a lot of this is, talking to other food influencers in that city I'm going to,
Uh-huh.
really understanding what is like locally happening there.
Yeah.
And I think it's like potentially a community that is these like very, very hyper personalized recommendations on, I don't want to just have a default normal trip. I wanted to, truly align with, who I am today. Right. And I know there's a lot of like trip planning services there from
Yeah.
an AI perspective and all that stuff. But I
Yeah.
think, something about communities today, I think what strengthens it is actually you end up just trusting operators that have actually like lived and done it before, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of this would be working with people that have actually done the experience, have actually, experienced the kind of emotions and all that stuff. And I think
Yeah.
that will never go away. And I think
Yeah.
maybe that could be a fun micro community I would start on the side.
Cool. I love that. That aligns well with your food Instagram profile as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I would love to move on to our last segment. It's called Would You Ship, where I pitch you a futuristic product idea in your industry and you tell me if this is a product you would ship. So the product is called memory rooms. And so these are physical rooms in your house that recreate like emotionally significant environments from memories in your life. So it can be a room that completely changes and adapts to like visual, sound, temperature, scent, everything. So it could be like your childhood bedroom, or it could be like your first apartment that you moved into. Instead of focusing so much on the technical capabilities, I want to understand like the psychology behind it and if you think this is something you would ship or not. So would the ability to create these like hyper realistic memory rooms be good for people, or would that cause maybe like an unhealthy attachment to memories? Any thoughts on that?
That's pretty interesting. I think if it was a negative memory, I
Hmm.
think it would probably, probably create like deeper spirals, right? For maybe that specific individual, right? But maybe for the sake of here, we talk about, I think there's two areas, right? So I think there's one positive, historical kind of memories, right? But then I think future, manifestations, right? I think that's like a pretty interesting thing. I think like let's start with the latter, right? Which
Yeah.
is more like future core memories and kind of manifestation. I think like a huge part of like manifestation today is you can kind of think it, but maybe you're kind of like true inner side doesn't actually truly believe that you deserve it,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So I think we could actually bridge the gap of like, really believing and kind of feeling that I deserve to have X or
Hmm.
I deserve to have this job, right? I think it would
Yeah.
remove a lot of the doubt that comes along with when you initially kind of start manifesting and you're trying to figure out like, oh, why isn't it coming true, right? So I think that's
I
like a
love
pretty
that.
kind of yeah, I think that's like a really kind of interesting use case.
Yeah.
And then I think like, positive, memories. I think the interesting thing here is, yeah, I used to have a lot of like very like positive memories when I went to like India every, Christmas break
Yeah.
and like just spending time with my cousins,
Yeah.
having unlimited help, always
Yeah.
going on kind of trips and so on. And I think over here, I think the interesting piece is I think it would help a lot, like one, flip a negative mindset
Okay.
if you were in that mindset, right? I think a lot of the times people let like one moment in their day impact their full day. So
Yeah.
this would help you like flip kind of that mindset.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think second is I think there's this I think there's this kind of, this trend of like just self-awareness and just like understanding like who you are and actually having more of like kind of like a opt-in mentality versus like an opt-out mentality, right? Where I think like end of the day, I think your true success really comes down to like how deep you understand yourself. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of these like memory rooms could help like unlock like and resurface like why is it such a one positive memory and what does that say about myself, right? And then second, it could guide a lot of your decision making in the future too.
Okay, I love both those takes, both the manifestation room and the self-awareness room. No, I really like that. So it sounds like we'd ship this product.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay,
We can
let's go.
validate it. We can what would it be? Like, do you feel like it's like part lights, part like video, part scent? Like
Like,
what were you
yeah, like I hate the idea of it just being like you're wearing like some VR kind of stuff. Like I love the idea of like having the furniture like texture being able to change and like everything being able to adapt. So I almost think of it as like these like a live 3D printing situation with different materials. And then there's like sense and lighting and all that coming in to like really mimic it. And like even to the point if your like memory is maybe like outdoors somewhere in India, it's able to like sprout the tree and like get the smells and all that stuff. I mean, technically, I think we'd have some limitations there, but I think the vision could be there for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think that could probably like maintain and improve probably happiness levels probably across like humankind, right? I mean, I think like
Yeah.
feel like that would probably be one of like the, success metrics I would measure too, right? Like how do you feel? Do you like do you wake up inspired and do you go to bed fulfilled? Right. I mean, that could potentially be like a good like an NPS survey that we take to see like, hey, is this helping
Yeah.
the people that we are that are kind of our beta customers?
But I also think it'd be really interesting to see how those metrics would compare to like an alternative of like a Ready Player One situation where everything is just in sort of like a VR environment. So it'd be interesting to see if like having that like physical change, like having a tree actually sprout in front of you versus like your mind thinking there's a tree in front of you, if that would actually impact like how inspired or happy you feel at the end. Because like I'm huge on like touching grass. And I just feel like if I'm like watching a movie of grass or if I'm smelling something that smells like grass, it's not going to have the same psychological impact.
That's visual, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like how deep do you go with your senses, right? Is it all five or it's kind
Yeah.
of like an MVP, right? Where do you start first? Is it more of like a perfume or a scent that sprays from the walls and all that stuff that evoke it? And I don't think there's like a one size fits all, right? I think like
Oh,
you think about how people learn today, right? Some people are more audio, some people are more visual.
true.
I think like how like flashbacks and things like that get evoked are probably different, human by human.
Yeah.
So I think like, yeah, start small,
Yeah.
pick someone that has like, the deepest or largest kind of pain point and
Yeah.
see like where on that sense scale you should basically land for that initial product.
For sure. You talk like a product manager. Thank you so much, Kunal. This was awesome. Really enjoyed getting to pick your brain a little bit more on this stuff.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and it was fun to talk about things just outside of software and that kind of push the bounds of your thinking and where we are in this AI era.
Totally. For sure.